with that, I'd now request the Director for Energy Policy and International Relations, European Commission, Ms. Megan Richards, to please address all of us. Let's welcome her with a hand, ladies and gentlemen.
Is that a presentation? No, not today. Well, later. Good morning, everyone. I have a very thick file, but don't worry, I'm not going to speak so long. I'm glad to see that we're talking also about 6G. In other conferences, we talk about 5G. This means something quite different, of course. So first of all, I wanted to thank very much the India Smart Grid Forum for organizing this very important week on smart utilities, an area where we all have a common interest. From the European Union, of course, we have been partnering very intensely and over a number of years with the India Smart Grid Forum. We've been co-organizing workshops in previous editions of the India Smart Grid Week since 2015, and we have very much appreciated the enthusiasm, the dynamism of our joint work. We see Indian industry very much embedded in Europe. I just give two examples, Tata and ArcelorMittal as some examples. We see some of our very good European industrial actors here, and we think that we have a huge potential to work together to address the clean energy transition where we have a common interest. We have huge potential. We have common research and innovation interests and potential, and I think that the smart grid element of the clean energy transition is one where India in particular has a real added advantage and where we can really progress actively. So I'm looking very much forward to discussing with you in detail over the next 2 days. I wanted to briefly talk to you a little bit about our EU-India cooperation and collaboration, and I'm sure you will hear some more over the next days about this, and in particular about smart grids. I will speak to you very briefly about where we are in Europe with our 2030 legislation and some of the non-legislative acts that we're going to, that we are carrying out already. And of course, I will go in more detail this afternoon or later on this morning, I think, in terms of electricity market design improvements that we've made. And so those are some of the areas that we're going to talk about today. So as I said, the European Union attaches a huge amount of importance to the energy dialogue and cooperation with India. India is, of course, a strategic partner internationally, regionally, and as a democracy which applies international rules-based order, we see in India a really important partner for industry, civil society, democratic, rules-based principles, and of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, the importance of research and innovation and the huge potential for development in India. And here we think that we can share very much these common values and work together very closely as we have in the past, but the potential for furthering this is even greater. In the energy field, of course, we have many similarities, but also many differences. We nonetheless face some similar challenges. We are both in the European Union and in India very much dependent on imported energy supplies. This is something that makes us subject to price variation and adjustments. As you probably know, this has often a very negative impact on GDP when we see huge price increases in imported energy substances. But we're motivated and committed signatories of the Paris Climate Agreement. We think there's huge potential here to move forward in the clean energy transition, to develop domestic resources, to develop renewables. You have in this country huge potential for this. We have seen in Europe huge changes in the renewable sector from highly subsidized to almost unsubsidized renewables, huge reductions in the costs of renewables over the last few years, and with our new market design legislation, much better integration of these renewables into the grid, including with better decentralization of generation, better interconnections, etc. And we'll talk about those later on this morning in detail in the workshop. We want to both achieve the goals of energy security and decreased environmental and climate impact on our energy systems in a way that's affordable to our economy and to our citizens. As you know very well, in India, there's still 300 million people who don't have access to energy, and we think that leapfrogging new technologies that are clean, efficient, and affordable will have a great benefit, not only for India, but for the world as a whole. In terms of public governance of the energy sector, India and the EU face the challenge to run as effectively and efficiently as possible a multi-level system. In the European Union, which is composed still of 28 member states, we're hoping that will last beyond the end of March. Who knows what will happen? I'm not supposed to talk about those politically sensitive things, but let's see. We have shared competences in the energy field between the EU level and the individual member states, but we work very well together. And this integration of the internal market has been a very important element in terms of building up the internal energy market and having better cooperation amongst the member states. India, of course, as a federal country with 28 states and almost as many different languages as we have in Europe, has some of these similar challenges. So effective multilateral governance is not just a challenge, but also an opportunity. And we think that a lot can be gained from regional cooperation, where we have seen a lot of growth and potential here. As I mentioned also at the beginning, these interconnections and better integration of the markets can be very beneficial in terms of integrating renewables. When the sun is shining in the west of Europe, it may not be in the east, and this is same true of wind in the north and wind in the south, and you have similar issues in India, so these integrations and exchanges help us to manage better the grid. So these are also areas where we can develop. The European Union has adopted a communication on its strategy regarding cooperation with India, and energy and climate are core areas. We're very pleased that at the last two EU-India summits, our leaders, India's Prime Minister Modi and the Commission and Council Presidents Juncker and Tusk, have adopted an EU-India clean energy and climate partnership, and we have made a lot of progress in this partnership. We are implementing the work program with joint activities in offshore wind, solar energy, both at utility scale and rooftop, energy efficiency in buildings, clean energy financing, and of course, smart grids. And we see huge potential here. So we're looking forward to working with India on the second work program of this cooperation. So cooperation on smart grids runs very well, has resulted in a series of workshops through which we have exchanged a lot on smart grid demonstration projects, both in India and in the European Union. And we have addressed regulatory issues for better integration of renewables and for smart grid applications. We're particularly satisfied that this smart grid cooperation is not limited to talking, but includes a demonstration project, and we will be talking about that in much more detail. We are soon going to start a joint study on upscaling and transferring promising demonstrations in India and in the European context. So yesterday afternoon, you had an EU-India Smart Grid workshop here at ISUW 2019, and you saw the excellent shape of this cooperation with the involvement of EU and Indian utilities. So we're very happy that this afternoon we will also organize the second EU-India workshop on electricity market regulation and design. Without that good, solid regulatory base, it's very difficult to integrate renewables to drive forward this clean energy transition, and so we're going to look forward to that as well. We will also see this week the signing ceremony for a cooperation agreement between the French DSO Enedis, for which Mr. Monlubo is here, and Tata Power Delhi Distribution to seal their involvement as an EU co-funded joint smart grid demonstration project, really concrete proof of the smart grids cooperation that we are carrying out in the field. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have introduced a whole package of new legislation in Europe to drive forward our 2030 targets of increased renewables, increased energy efficiency, better interconnections, and of course reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we also have, and that package is almost finished, much of the legislation is in force or will come into force very soon. We also have a number of non-legislative actions, one of which is on clean energy for islands. The importance of islands was mentioned by ABB already, and we have introduced this also at global level at COP23, not last year, but the year before, and here we see a lot of potential as well. So we're very keen to share with our partners around the world. We think there is a lot of room for further exchanges and development with all stakeholders, industry, civil society, policymakers, governments at regional and at federal level. And we're looking forward very much to working with you, not just now, but also in the future to drive forward the clean energy transition, provide cheap, affordable, and sustainable energy to all our citizens, and to make sure that we work together to make the whole planet better for all of us. Thank you very much.